Yes, thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you for that introduction. I think I should ask you to even take the session because you've almost said everything about the Azure Active Directory. Thanks once again. Yes, glad to be here once again. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning from wherever you're joining. I'm glad to be here once again. Like Catherine rightly said, the topic for today is Microsoft 365 Identity Model and Azure Active Directory. So this is part of the series we've been having with our Microsoft 365 Fundamental. Yes, this has been going on for a while now. And like we said, we actually decided to take everybody on this journey. And if you are a student or an IT pro or you're just starting your career, this is the right place for you to be because we decided to take it from the basic and we're looking all the way to going to the expert level. So if you are here, welcome, and I'm glad to be here with you. We can all learn together. So a little bit of introduction about myself. Once again, my name is Olajuwonke Oturiola. I'm the community lead for the MCTNAIJA M365 user group. Um, I'm an MCT, and then what the group is basically about is for us to be able to foster knowledge amongst IT professionals, students, security administrator, cloud productivity administrator, and then we're doing this having our meets up regularly, starting from our meets up regularly every Friday. We have our Twitter handle. You can always join us, and if there's any other thing you need from us, please join our WhatsApp group also so that you can give us, maybe if you have any question around deployment or you have anything that you want us to help you with, we can always help to answer your question. So this is just a little bit of me, and then on the screen you can find my Twitter, you can find my LinkedIn profile, and then there's something coming on great, and I'm so excited about this. So before I jump into my topic for today, I want to just quickly talk about this. So it's coming soon, and it's going to happen very soon, starting from next month, 5th of September. It's going to run for 2 months. I'm so excited about this. I can't even wait for you to start, and I hope you are excited the same way I am. Because what's going to happen is that we're going to have MCT from the whole West Africa country. Can you imagine? We're going to have 8 days of intensive training, and we're going to have 64 speakers, 64 sessions, 64 workshops, and everything is going to happen virtually. So, I can't wait for the day to come because it's going to be a lot of learning experience. You can imagine having all of these uh, um, um, MCTs from West Africa. Some of them are even abroad, but they're going to be coming in and we're going to be thinking. So this is Africa for Africa. This is what we're trying to do for ourselves. And our sponsor, Microsoft, is the one. Microsoft is sponsoring us and some other learning, some other learning providers, vendors, and they're going to be assisting us in all of this. So if you're coming, you apart from gaining the knowledge, we have free bigs we're going to give out. We have digital badges, we have t-shirts. If you're in Nigeria, that will be coming from me, the M365 user group. If you're in Nigeria, just make it a date with us starting from 5th of September. Actually, it's going to be a multi-track session. It's actually going to be from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. So you can actually look at the time frame that suits if you're joining from other parts of Africa, if it is not Nigeria. So look out for this. They will be announcing it on social media for you to join us. Now, to the agenda for today. My The agenda for today, I'll just run through it. I'm going to be looking at what is identity. We want to talk about identity models. The first thing that will come to mind, yes, I know there are some IT pro here, there are some that are associate, and there are some that are expert. But like I said, we're giving room for students. We're giving room for people that are just starting their career in IT. So these whole lessons of we taking everyone through this process is because we want to handhold everyone to be able to come up to speed the way we are that are already expert. So we're going to be looking at what is an identity. We're going to be looking at identity provider and Active Directory actually. Then what is the Azure Active Directory? And then we're going to be looking at the difference between the Azure Active Directory and the Windows Active Directory, which is referred to as Active Directory Domain Services, which is ADDS for sure, if I call it that. We're going to be looking at the Azure AD license. Then we will now delve into the identity models in Microsoft 365. Then we're going to be looking at the difference between the cloud only and hybrid identity. So these are some of the things we'll be looking at. And then please, once again, once you come in, please mute your mic so that you don't distract me. And then after that, we'll jump into the demo. So without wasting much of our time, during the week, I actually sent some of the recordings that we've done and the exercise. So we've been doing some exercise this is the third of this series. So we'll be doing some exercise. We've done the exercise for the Microsoft 365, where we had to sign up for tenants and go through the tenants. Then just like Catherine described, we did the one for last week, where we have to use PowerShell to manage all the the user, the groups, and the licenses on our Microsoft 365. And step by step of all of those exercises has been shared with all of us. So if you've not already gotten that, don't worry, we've got you covered. James will be sharing that in the chat window. Just look out in the chat window, you will have that. So what is identity? And then I want to speak a bit about identity provider and Active Directory. Now, for every one of us, we are used to carrying out a form of transaction in one way or the other. We have people that goes to probably maybe you want to check your emails, you want to go even to you want to check up your bank accounts, but there's a need for you to do what? To put in a username and password. So identity is anything that gets you authenticated, which means you have an identity for you to anything that makes you to be able to produce what? A username and a password becomes an identity. And so at the back end of when you put this username and password, there is something that is actually authenticating you or verifying that you are who you say you are. So that is actually what the identity provider is all about. So the identity provider is actually the one that creates, maintains, and manages your identity information. And then at the same time does what? Provide you authentication. And as we look deep into this, we'll see also how they give you what? An authorization for you to be able to access any form of resources that you come into the environment to look at. So there are different types of identity provider that we have. We have Amazon, we have GitHub, we have Google, we have LinkedIn, we have Microsoft and Twitter. These are a few of the ones I can name here. Then you also look at, so we want to talk about Active Directory, but I don't want to just go into Active Directory yet because, like I said, the topic is Azure Active Directory. But before I go into Azure Active Directory, I want to lay the foundation of what Active Directory is. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is that I can't say anything on Active Directory without talking about a domain controller. If you don't know, don't worry, you're going to cover. Just continue to just look at what we're saying, and then you will get very comfortable at the end of the day. Now, there's something on the network at every time where you put in your username and password and authenticates you and allow you to access any resources on the network. That is a domain controller. Is that server on the network that centrally manages access of every user on the network. Now, the Active Directory can actually be likened to what your phone directory system is. Now, I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with the phone directory system, and what that does for you is that it keeps an inventory of what your phone is, your phone system is, your phone number, your username, your first name, your last name, your address, your state, your country code. A typical phone directory will have all of that. So that becomes like a database. So let's switch from that phone directory, coming now into an Active Directory. So an Active Directory is basically that kind of database that organizes or keep in one central location an organization user, computers, it can be printers or any resources and all of that. So when you typically come to your network, maybe you even come into your machine, if you're running not a domain or you're running a domain environment, not a workgroup environment, what you'll be doing is that you'll be putting a username and password. At the point where you put in a username and password, there is something at the back end that is actually verifying that, oh, this person, do I have that username and password in my database for me to verify this person to come in? So that process with which he allows you to come in to verify the identity which you bring with you to enter into the network is actually what is called the authentication process. Now, I have come into the network, but I need to access resources. It could be a printer, it could be a file server. Now, what my Active Directory will do again is to see if I am authorized to be able to access any of those file server, or I'm authorized to be able to access any of those, the printer on the network. So basically, your Active Directory does these major two tasks. It does your authentication and then it does your authorization. And then at the end of the day, what it does is that it also do what? A little bit of auditing. We'll come to that. And so it chooses, how does it do this authentication and authorization on the network? It uses a protocol that is called Kerberos and HTML for the authentication process. So we'll come to that maybe when I just show you, because we have to set up an Active Directory ahead of environment. Ahead of next week session, which will require us to have like an Active Directory in place for us to be able to go through that session appropriately. So you have Windows directory on-premise. So the Windows Active Directory on-premise is actually referred to the Active Directory domain services. So with this little background, I can now come into what is Azure Active Directory. So we realize, like what I've just said right now, that the Active Directory on-premise is actually the Active Directory domain services. So that is what we have on-premise. But when it comes to the cloud, like every authentication provider that provides you an authentication, it's either they are in the cloud or they are on-premise. So for Microsoft, when you want to access any of the Microsoft 365 resources, whether it is because of your user account, you want to, your services like Exchange Online, like SharePoint Online, or any of the SaaS apps that you have on Microsoft 365, there has to be something that authenticates you. If you've signed up for your M365 subscription, you find out that at each time you want to log in, it will ask you for username and password. So at the point of you putting that username and password, what is actually authenticating the identity which you're coming with is actually the Azure Active Directory, and it's included in the Microsoft 365 subscription. Like what it does basically is that it provides authentication, is also the one that verifies your licensing and then authorize you to be able to access any of these applications. And so we can actually say it provides an identity as a service. Remember, when we're talking about the cloud computing model, we talk about the different services that we have under the cloud computing. When the very first time we treated the topic, we talk about, apart from that, the major ones, which are the infrastructure as a service, software as a service, and platform as a service. Those are the major ones, but we have other ones, just like this, identity as a service. Okay, so the difference between them. So we have a little background of what Azure AD is, and then what is Windows AD. So a little bit of differences between the two of them. Now, when you look at Azure AD, it is cloud-based. So it's the cloud-based identification and authentication platform. But when you look at the Active Directory domain service, it's actually what? On-prem. Again, both of them can do what? User and computer management. So somebody has, are you saying that I can actually join a system to Azure AD? Yes, you can join the system to Azure AD. Though even if you're in a work group, you can join a system. What about a phone? Yes, you can join an Android device also to an Azure AD. Then the question that comes is, what about management? So when it comes to management, those are the differences between it. Now, why Azure AD, we leverage on what is called the mobile device management, probably maybe the Microsoft Intune to do a bit of its policy pushing. Probably you want to say you want to create a wallpaper, or you want to say you want to block people from how they will log into or their USB and all of that. You can actually use Azure AD will leverage on Intune. However, it's actually very limited in the kind of policies you can define on it. But when it comes to Active Directory domain services, which reside on-premise, you have the flexibility of doing a lot of creating these group policies. What we mean by group policy is policies that are defined on the network to define probably per departmental, it can be per group, it can even be per organization unit to say, oh, they must be able to access this level of resources, or they must be able to have this form of experience when they log in. So that's what your Azure, that's one of the differences between Azure AD and Active Directory. Another thing about it is that with Active Directory domain service, you get things like domain trust. You get things like Active Directory sites and services. You don't get such with Azure AD. We'll come to that when we promote our first domain controller, and then we'll compare it when we have our Windows AD also. So another thing is that credentials in Active Directory are actually based on password, certificate authentication, and smart authentication, whereas Azure AD uses intelligent password protection for cloud and on-premises. So these are some of the things, and the protocol they use are quite different. When SaaS applications that are being accessed on Azure AD, they will be using what is called OAuth version 2, but for Active Directory domain services, you'll be using things like your Kerberos and then your LDAP for query. So the different Azure Active Directory licenses that we have, there are 4 major ones. So you have the Azure Active Directory free, we have Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 1, Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 2, and then you have the pay-as-you-go feature license, which is actually for the business to customer, and probably the B2B, which is business to business also. So you have that. So you have Azure AD Premium. That one is is the free version that comes with your Microsoft 365 subscription. And what that will allow you to do, it will allow you to do what is create your users, your group management. Again, you can do what is called self-service password. That is, you want to change password, but only, there's a clause here, only for cloud user. Then you have a single sign-on on all your Azure Office 365 and your SaaS app. So that's what your Azure AD will provide you, the basic one. But when it comes to Azure AD Premium, which you will appreciate more probably when we're talking about it next week, or when we come into the EMS part of the topic, you will appreciate it more, because with Azure AD Premium, apart from what Azure AD Free or the basic can do, you have what is called the hybrid users capability with it, which means if you have Azure AD Premium Plan 1, you can both manage your users on-premise and in the cloud. So you have that ability, and then your users both on-premise and the cloud can access both on-premise and cloud resources simultaneously. Then you have what is called the Microsoft Identity Manager. So that's what will come in. I mean, it's been 2016, but I think that's the last version that Microsoft wants to release. You have the ability for you to do what dynamic group, self-service management, and then you have this ability also to do what is called a self-service password reset. So look at the difference between Azure AD Free and then the Azure AD Premium. Azure AD Free will allow you to do what? Self-service password within the cloud for cloud users alone. But if you say you change this password in a situation where you run in an hybrid environment and you want that password to write back to your on-premise, then you will need an Azure AD Premium Plan 1. So Azure AD Premium Plan 2 contains all of this feature of Azure AD Plan 1, and then also provides you with what is called conditional access. So you want to put a form of restriction to say when people come into your network, or from which location they are, they are coming in, you want to put a form of restriction there to say, oh, when you're coming from this location, maybe I want to deny you, or I want you to do another level of authentication. So what will allow you to do that is Azure AD Premium Plan 2. You also have privileged identity management, which helps you to restrict, first of all, to discover, restrict, and monitor administrators and their accesses to resources. So maybe you are in an environment that feels, okay, people just have a lot of, everybody is a global admin. So what helps you to manage all of that? You will need your privileged identity management. And then you have just-in-time access also, which can actually say that for a particular person to access a resource on the network, it needs this minimal time for him to be able to do that. Please, I will appreciate if everyone that comes in can actually mute their mic. I mean, I think I'm getting a lot of noise from, yeah. Then lastly, you have the Azure Active Directory business to customer, which can also help you to provide identity and access management. So let's assume you have you have an environment where your customer should be able to come in and be able to access the resources on your tenant. This is where the pay-as-you-go will be useful. So you have that. So you can create actually customer-facing app and then be able to allow them to come in with their own identity, to log in and be able to access those apps on your tenants. So with that being said, okay. So with that being said, I'm just going to move straight to the identity models that we have. So at the core of every process that you have that takes place in the Microsoft 365 tenant, you have to have a username and a password. I've said that already. And so you have two identity model, which is actually the cloud-only identity model and the hybrid identity model. So what does this mean? When you look at the cloud identity model, everything on it, just the word cloud, everything about the cloud identity model, everything is done in the cloud. So there's no need for you to have anything on premise. There is nothing for you to have. There is no need for you to have anything, any server on premise. And it is actually very, very recommended. I mean, you can actually recommend it for an organization that is in the work group, a small organization that doesn't want to be, it's just stay in the work group environment. So they don't want to have anything, and they don't really have probably a lot of group policy that they want to define on the network and all of that. So just want to keep their installation as simple as possible. One of the other things you need to realize with cloud-only identity is that the user account and password are stored in Azure AD. So you can actually guess what will happen when you have the on-premise, when you have an hybrid. So you can actually decide, we'll come to that really, where the password of the user accounts are stored. So it also does what? With cloud-only identity, you perform authentication using the sets of accounts that you have created. So, I mean, the accounts that you've permitted, so whether it is a guest account in a situation where you want a customer to come in, or it is also the identities you've created on your Azure AD, like your users, your groups, and all of that. So they have that set of accounts to come in and then authenticate with it. Now, management of the user accounts are actually done with Office 365, or then you can actually also make use of what the PowerShell, just like Idara showed us the last time. Now, this is the basic components of the cloud-only identity. So you can see from here, let me see if I can get my pointer. Okay. So you can see from here, you have the on-premise user. This is your organization, and you have Microsoft 365. So with the cloud only, this is where you have the users. And then you see that they are just, this arrow is showing that they get authenticated with what? With Azure AD, and this is where their account and password are stored. So this is the basic component of a cloud-only identity. Now, with the hybrid identity, if you remember what we say with hybrid means that, okay, so you are running some part of your resources in the cloud, and then some part of your resources also what on-premise. But what happens, so we'll go into that, we'll go in depth into that next week. What happens, the challenges that your user ahead of time will face will be, I already have an account that is stored. Remember, my identity when I create my user accounts is stored in the cloud, in Azure AD, if I'm a cloud user. Now, because maybe I want to use Exchange Online, I created accounts for the users there. Then I come back to on-premise, which means I have an environment where I am running Active Directory Domain Services, ADDS, already on-premise. I would have created user accounts for those users also. So it becomes a sort of hybrid identity, which means that my users will have to, so there's a challenge of saying my users need to remember 2 different passwords, which will simplify and show you how that is done next week. That we can actually bring those 2 accounts together, and then your user will just use the same credentials or identities they're using on-premise, they will take it to the cloud. So that will be shown next week. But ahead of time, like I said, we'll prepare the environment down ahead of that next week. So with an hybrid identity, user accounts that originate in an on-premise Active Directory also do what? They also have a copy in Azure AD. So that is done by a tool that is called Azure AD Connect. We'll come to that next week also, like I said. So just watch out, don't miss next week's session. Then the authoritative source of account information is actually your on-premise Active Directory domain services. So depending on the kind of hybrid identity authentication model you're using, which I'll be showing in the next slide, your authentication provider can either be Azure AD or on-premise. So I'll take that again. Now, as much as when it comes to account information, who is the authoritative source of it? It is your on-premise Active Directory domain services. But depending on the kind of authentication you're using with your hybrid identity, because you have 2 types, it will actually show you whether the authentication, I'm not using accounts now, the authentication provider who is actually authenticating you at that time is either be Azure AD or your on-premise ADDAS. So we'll come to that. So one of the things you need to look at hybrid identity is that changes flow only in one way. So when you change your password or you change anything, synchronization is actually taking place from what? From on-premise, and a copy is taken to what? To the cloud, you know. So changes made also to cloud-based account Azure AD, such as user accounts, are not synchronized back with ADDS. But there are certain things that you can do a write back. Remember what I said when I showed the different types of licensing that you have with Azure AD. When you're using the Azure AD Premium Plan, when you make a change of your password in the cloud, it can actually write back to your on-premise ADDS. So that's what we call self-service password write back. Now, administration tasks are actually performed on-premise when you're using an hybrid identity. You can't do a lot of your administrative tasks, and I mean, you can't do it on Azure AD. So all of those things that you do, remember, like we said, the changes are in one way. So whatever you've done on-premise is synchronized back to Azure AD. So taking us to the hybrid identity authentication model is actually, I don't really want to delve into this, because delving into this will not make you as appreciate when next week Adekunle Dean will be talking about this. So, but I just want to touch it on the surface. So you have 2 types of authentication method in hybrid identity. You have the managed authentication, and we also have the federated identity authentication. Now, under the managed authentication, you actually have what is called, like, it's more of a synchronized identity, but there are 2 types of it. You have the password hash synchronization, which Azure AD is the one that performs the authentication. Remember what I said later on. I said when it comes to account information, the authoritative owner of the record is who? Is the on-premise. But when it comes to authentication, depending on the kind of hybrid identity authentication you're doing, is either Azure AD is the one that performs the authentication itself, or Azure AD as the on-premise Active Directory domain services perform the authentication for it. So this is some of the questions you get to see in your, if you want to write the M365 certification. It can be very tricky. These are some of the questions you will see. Well, when you have a password hash synchronization, which is normally referred to as PHS, Azure AD actually is what is your authentication provider, is the one authenticating. So what happens with a password hash synchronization is this: you have your user's identity synchronized to the Azure AD platform. And what will happen there is that you have the hash of the password synchronized. So that's what the password, that's why it's called what? The password hash synchronization. So you don't really have the copy of that. You don't have the exact copy of that password, but what you actually have is what? The hash of the password. So at that time, because the hash of the password is on Azure AD, when a user goes and say, I want to access Exchange Online, I go to okota.office.com. Who is actually authenticating it at that time is actually what? The Azure AD, even when the account information resides on what? On-premise. Now, when it comes to pass-through authentication, just like the word says, the pass-through authentication is more, so you look at it in a form of what? A proxy. So I proxy what? The authentication to who? To Azure, to on-premise Active Directory. So what happens is this: Azure AD does not store any copy of the hash of my password. So it gets what? It takes it back to what? It directs me back, because there is an agent running on-premise, on my on-premise domain controller that will be speaking at the same time with Azure AD. So there is a form of a check and let me use the word check and balance, or there's a form of information communication transversing between Azure AD and your on-premise server. So at the point when a user wants to do what? Sign in with a username and password, Azure AD does what first? It looks at its database. Okay, I have this user there. Now, what kind of authentication model is it using? Is using pass-through authentication. Then it does what? It processes that request to what? The Azure, to the on-premise Active Directory domain services, which now performs the authentication. So it gives the user back a token. So my colleague, my learned MCT colleague will put more light on that this week. Then we'll have what is called a federated identity. Now you have a situation where you sync on-premise directory objects with Office 365, but at the same time, you do not want them to be, you want them to have a single sign-on. So which means that I come into my machine, immediately I sign in to my machine, every of my SaaS applications that are open, I don't need to do any signing again. So you have what is called a federated server. So a federated server, which also have a proxy server, it does more of that same authentication also. But what happens now is that there is nothing around your username or password that is stored in Azure AD also. Everything is what comes back through that federated server. It proxies the request back to what? To your Active Directory domain server on-premise. So one will ask, so what's the difference between federated identity and then the pass-through authentication? I will just say one thing, that what Microsoft was actually trying to do with the pass-through authentication, because federated identity is actually very, very, very expensive to implement, because you don't need anything less than 4 servers. Sometimes, and if you don't want to use 4 servers, that means you want to host it even in the cloud. And when you want, because you want to have redundancy around those servers, both your federated server and then the proxy server. So what Microsoft has done is that they give us a mini of federated identity with the pass-through authentication. So that's what the pass-through authentication is actually doing, in a bit doing. So but what happens is that the traffic is coming. In all of these identity model, Microsoft still say password hash synchronization is what's advice that you go to. So I'm just going to quickly, that's the end of my demo, but I'm just going to quickly run through a little bit of demo. So first of all, I know for some of us that have not already signed up for it, I'm going to share this link again in the chat window, and then you can actually sign up for it. But if you have an environment where you can spin up a virtual machine, maybe you have an Hyper-V or you have a Windows 10 that has adequate resources, you can actually spin up a virtual machine. If not, take this link. They are only just going to ask you for a credit card. If you have a credit card that just have maybe 1,000 inside it, you can put it, they're not going to deduct anything really. So if you want to have that level of comfort, so what you're going to do is that you can sign up for Azure free, and they're going to give you what, $200 credit free, which you can use to what, run your environment. So this is what is going to be like, and then this is what the process is just going to be like, where you have to put in all of these details, and then make sure that as the time you're doing this, probably you can do that from your tenant. For some of us that has already signed up and we have a tenant already, so you can do that. But I've done that already. Being an MCT, I have the MCT pass, so I can always request for a pass and then do what's to do. So now this is, if you want to get to the Azure Active Directory, the first thing you will come to is that, remember we took you through a little bit of this environment the last time. And then we said the admin center, you have a lot of admin center, and then from there you come towards Azure Active Directory. Once you collapse this, get your Azure Active Directory. And once that opens up, this is what is going to open up for you. Also, another thing that we've done, this is actually what your tenant's name, which is what my tenant's name is, what winterslt.onmicrosoft.com, you know. So when you look at this, this is what your Azure Active Directory environment will be. And then you have like 4 things here. You have the overview session, you have the manage session, the monitoring session, and the troubleshooting or support session, where you can always ask for help. Now, when you look at this, you have the overview, which gives you a little bit of information around what your tenant is all about. The information, and then probably the license type you have. Remember when I talked about the Azure AD license type, I have what, the premium plan too. If you follow also the step-by-step guide for you to run the developer's subscription, you should be seeing the same thing that I'm saying. So once again, go through those exercises. For the best part, I'm going to surprise somebody one day. If you are such that did your exercise very well and you participated very well, I actually will be giving you a gift, but I don't want to announce it yet because I know everybody wants to do it. So another thing is that you have your primary domain, you know. So I have my custom domain that has been verified. This is some of the things that Idara took us through last week, where we're able to verify our domain, add our custom domain, go through the steps of adding the custom domain. Then you have quick links here where you can create user, where you can create guest user also, you can create groups, and even if you can create any enterprise application. So one of the things also, if you look at the Get Started, these are very, very good resources, please. These are very good resources you can leverage on. If you are new to Microsoft technology, it's actually not very hard. I can trust you. If there is any OEM or vendor that makes learning very simple, very, very easy, I'll give this to Microsoft, because the information around their product is easily accessible on the internet. So even if you feel you don't want to go to, you don't know where to search for, just come into some of these places. You see the Get Started environment, and then you'll be able to go there. So you have under the overview, these are some of the things you have. Then under Manage, now I come to users. Now the same users that I've created, that I have on my Office 365, in my Office 365 is the same user. Can you see? This same user is just because the admin center is showing it to me. But where this user's information are actually kept is under what? My Azure AD. So I have the users here. I have the option for me to create new user. If I create this new user here also, it's still going to be the same thing that I did there. And I'll be able to create the same first name, last name, put them in a group, assign them a role. And then here you can see the settings here, just like what you can see in your admin center, whether you want to block the user, you want to talk about the location the user is from, you can put the user's information. So basically, what you create here is actually the same thing. And then you see you have the option, just like what we've done, because I brought in my custom domain. So there is the good thing. Okay, someone says they can see my screen. Please, do you mind reconnecting? Maybe you just sign out and sign in back, please. So the good thing, can everyone see my screen, please? Hello?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, all right, very well. Thank you. So The thing you will want to do, I think what you might want to do, so the first thing you want to do is that get your custom domain so it can be easier for you and make it default. So the beauty about the Azure Active Directory tenant or Microsoft 365 tenant is that you can actually run a multi-tenancy in it also. Well, I said that very guardedly because somebody will say, what do you mean running tenancy? So let's give an example. Let's assume that you have a subsidiary, and then the subsidiary, just like the one we did last time, was charville.com.ng. And you have users there and you want to manage every one of them under the same platform. So I can bring my custom domain as many as possible and then make, so at the point of me creating user, if user A is for winters.com.ng, then user B can be for chavis.com.ng, you know. So, and then you can also do what? Create a form of permission, so to say, or resources each of those users can view. So in a way, you've actually also, if you don't want to, if you have subsidiary, you don't want to create different kinds of Office 365 tenant for each of them, you can actually bring it also. So just liken it to the way of, you know, when we're in the university, some of us, when you're giving an hostel, you become a landlord when you're even a tenant in the hostel. So you get somebody on board again, so that kind of a thing. So you can actually have that, you know, if it works for your environment. Then you have the new guest user. So the same activity that Idara took us through, we can actually do a bulk activity of bulk create or bulk invite or even a guest user if you have all of the users. So you can actually do a bulk invite of them. So you have the multi-factor authentication, which is also a second level of authentication. So if I turn this authentication method up right now, if I go into this place, it means that I have turned that, this is still loading. It means that I have said that I want to be able to enable authentication. Right now, I have, if you look at the status for everyone, it is disabled right now. So if I enable it, it means that at the point of either coming in, is going to be able to, what he has to provide another set of authentication, probably maybe with a phone or probably maybe with a PIN or a code from his phone. So you have that with Azure AD, and that is what, so Azure AD still helps you to take what? Authentication further. So it's helping you to take authentication further. You have authentication, but then you can still do what? You can still put another level of protection on your authentication. Now you look at deleted items, you have a pane for deleted items where all the users that you've deleted, they will be here. You have the option for what? For password reset. This option is actually different from me going to a user account here and I select a user here and I say what? Reset password. This is different. This is on the user level. This setting is on the user level. But when I come into this place, this is actually on the organization level. What I'm actually doing here is that I'm actually saying that whether for users that are synchronized to my Azure AD, I'm sure every one of us will be familiar with the word synchronized right now because I'm running an hybrid environment. So I want them to be able to do what? A self-service password reset. Remember when we were going through the different types of Azure AD licensing, we already said it. We said for Azure AD free plan, cloud-only users can do what? Can reset their password. But when I come to this, for me to be able to use this feature and say selected, I'm actually saying that if my account is a synchronized identity, which means it's an hybrid identity, if I change my password in the cloud, it should write back to my on-premise. So you have that also. Then you have the different kinds. When that is turned on, you have the different kinds of authentication, which is what I explained, whether you want to use email, mobile for mobile app code and all of that. We'll come into detail. We'll have an in-depth discussion on this. Then you have user settings, you know, where you can say whether users can register their apps and all of that. Then you can actually monitor what is called what your sign-in or the sign-in activity of your users. You know, it gives me like an overview of all the signing, maybe, and the locations probably maybe where they're signing in from, and also the IP address. And these are the places that gives me an overview of if the location is a compromised location or locations like Russia, or I don't want them to come in from, I can actually take actions, you know. Then you have the opportunity for you to also audit. Remember what I said. I said a good identity provider will provide you with these three capabilities. It will be able to authenticate you, authorize you to access the resources, and at the end of the day, do what? Audit your access to all of those resources. So you have that. Okay, so with the Azure AD, so you have the groups also, you know, like you can create the group, the same M365. So you have the different kinds of group you can create. You have the groups here by default. When you set up your M365 subscription, you have these two groups by default, which are and you can see they are cloud source. So you can also sync your group from on-premise to Azure AD, which we'll be looking at later. Now, you can actually do a setting for naming convention also, naming policy, and you can actually expire an M365 group or a group and say that if a group has been inactive, you know, this comes to mind. I don't know how many of us is familiar with when we use Microsoft Teams. When you use Microsoft Teams, you actually create what is called, when you create a channel, it creates what is called a Teams group, an Office 365 group for you. So when that is created, and then maybe there's not much activities there, what you can set is that you can set a lifetime for groups. So you want to say a group is what expires at a particular time, maybe it's not, it becomes inactive, so you can set it here. Then you have naming policy you can actually define for your Azure Active Directory. So if you look at what Azure Active Directory offers you, it's very likened to what you get on your on-premise Active Directory domain and services. The only thing is that when it comes to group policy, it's not so much the limitation. That's where you get the limitation of when you want to do a very massive form of group policy settings. But even with that, you can actually, if you feel you're a very small environment and you don't need all of that, you can do a lot of the activities. Now you look at application proxy. What is application proxy doing? An application proxy will help you, just like the WhatsApp proxy. You are in the lockdown. Everybody's working from home. Does my IT people need to go to the office just because they want to work on an application, or my users need to go into the office because they want to quickly send and work on an HR app and all of that? No, with application proxy, I can bring that application that sits on premise. I can bring it to wherever my users are, even as they're working from home. So that's what your application proxy will do for you. So, and then it allows you to do what is called a single sign-on. Then this is where you have the Azure AD Connect. Remember what I've been saying since. Dean will be coming here to show you all of this. So I want to bring in to merge the identity that I have on premise. I want to merge it with the identity that is in the cloud. What is going to allow me to do that is what is called Azure AD Connect, which we'll be looking at next week. And you can see the different kinds of authentication methods we spoke about before. We have the federation, we have the pass-through, and then we have the seamless single sign-on. So we'll look at all of these next week. So with that said, I have 3 minutes. I just want you to go on your own. You have what is called the company branding, where you can decide to say you want to put your logo. You want to put your logo. So when I say configure here, it's going to allow me to do what? Put a background for. These are some of the exercises I'm going to put for you next week, really, for this week. So you are going to create what is called a background. So when your user, maybe you have your company banner, you want it to be what shows when you want to log into your Office 365 to your portal, and then you have a banner, your logo, then probably maybe you want to give your user a form of hints, and maybe if they want to sign in, what their username and password, their username will be like. Then you want to change background color. This is where you do it. So you do company branding here. So when we are treating enterprise mobility plus security suite, where we'll be dedicating Azure AD premium plan 1, we'll be doing more justice to this. So never mind, we'll look at this in depth. So with that, I just want to quickly say something. Can everyone still give me like 5 minutes? So I just want to quickly look at that real quick. 5 minutes more, please, because we actually didn't start early. So I still have like 5 minutes. I want to quickly look at it. So there's something that sometimes don't let us confuse Azure AD. Don't confuse the word Azure AD with Microsoft Azure. I think a lot of confusion comes in there. The Microsoft Azure is Microsoft Cloud Platform. Azure AD, because for every cloud provider, they must have what is called what? An identity provider that must be able to authenticate any user identity coming into that tenant or their environment, their platform, to access resources. So when people hear Microsoft Azure, they get confused that what is Microsoft Azure? What is Azure AD? You know, there's that confusion. Microsoft Azure is the cloud platform. Azure AD is the identity provider. So you are coming to my platform to come access my resources, but something needs to authenticate you, and that is where Azure AD comes in, because it is sitting in. Now, because Microsoft Cloud Platform has a lot of resources, one of the resources that sits on Microsoft is just what? Your Microsoft 365 subscription. It's just your Office SaaS. They have a lot of subscription. I remember what we said the other day. There are different kinds of what the deployment model that we have, infrastructure as a service, software as a service. So what we've done right now is this. I have used my pass, and also if you follow this same process that I showed you earlier for you to get, you will, at the end of the day, you will have an environment that looks like this also. So you can actually create, this is the home page. You can just click on it. You can look at the subscription. So for every Microsoft Azure you have, you will need a subscription. A subscription is just, can be likened to what? Please can someone mute? I think someone is can somebody mute his mic, please? So thank you for that. So you have a subscription. Now what this subscription grants you, just liken it to your DSTV subscription, it's what allows you to be able to do a view channels. So in this case, I'm not viewing channels, I'm viewing the resources that are on Microsoft Azure. So I can see any resources for me to use you. So you need this subscription. So, and I'm glad, if you need more information here, please, it is not only the M365 user group that we have in the community. We have the Azure User Nigeria, where you can learn Azure very well. You have all of that, so you can visit the group. You can look out for those groups, or if you want to know the group, just DM me, just send a message to me. I'll give you the link for you to be able to join the group. We have different kinds of group. We have the Power BI. If you want to learn, we have Power Platform. So we have a lot of user group in the community that you can leverage on. If you want to know things more on Azure, I would advise that you go to that Azure user group, the Nigeria Azure user group, because they have very good content there, and you can be rest assured to learn very well. So what you can do, if you have another subscription you want to bring in, you can actually click on that. But I have this single subscription that is from the Azure Pass. So with this subscription, then I can create what is called I can create resources, and I can continue to consume resources. So I'll go back to my home. So I've verified that I have a subscription at the point of me signing up to a free version of Azure. So I want to create a resource. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create my my DC ahead of time against next week. So what you can do is this: when you come to your virtual machine, you create that you want to add a new virtual machine. Right now I have one, Winters DC01, and I have client DC001. And then so I want to create a new virtual machine. Now, the virtual machine, there are certain things you want to do before you create that virtual machine, but not to worry. That same thing you want to do, you can actually have there. And what do I mean that you need to have? The first thing you want to create is what is called your resource group. Your resource group is actually like a container that keeps every resources that you create on the Microsoft Azure platform. They create it puts them together, probably maybe because you want to put them together and put a policy or a permission to govern all of those, to govern every resources in that container. So you have what is resource. So you might want to say, okay, you have a resource group for all your database. You have a resource group for all your front-end servers. You have a resource group for all your web servers. You can create a resource group. So you create them because you want to define the same policy or permissions for them. So that's one of the things you might first want to do, but not to worry. When you want to create, if you don't have one already, it will create a new one. So the first thing I want to do is to create, I have already one existing, but like I said, if you say you want to create a new one, all you need to do is probably just say test. If this is not my first time, if this is my first time, Azure AD, sorry, Microsoft Azure will pick one for me by default. Then I want to give it a name. So yeah, I'm going to create a test DC also. So let me call this, I hope it goes through because I've used this test before. Then it's very important for you to do it. This is the name of my virtual machine. So this name is not taken. It's very important. It doesn't take all of those characters, like all of those underscore character, all of that. It's not going to take it when you're creating a name for your virtual machine. Then the next thing you want to do is to determine your region. Now, one of the things, yes, we get excited. I know some of us are so excited that we have South Africa as part of the region, but sometimes you might also want to look at this region in the kind of resources you can get with those regions, especially when it comes to your availability options. What I mean by availability options are options that gives you that you can leverage on what is called a form of redundancy. So you want to verify that whatever region you have is flexible enough to offer you that. So yes, for me, I'm going to pick in West Europe because it's pretty very close to me, so I can still select it. Then, like I said, availability option, if you talk about availability option, which you have set and zone, I don't want to waste time on this because, like I said, please visit the Azure User Nigeria group. You will have tons of they have a lot of learning materials there for you to go through. So I'm not going to pick anything because this is going to take too much money. I just have 100 in a month. So I'm going to be very careful with the resources I'm buying. Remember, just like you go into a store and everything is calling you, buy me, buy me, buy me. With Office 3, with Microsoft Azure also, you have a lot of fancy good things there, but you have to be careful because of your monetary commitment, or else you will just find out at the end of the day, under 1 hour, you've spent $100. So for the image, I'm going to be picking Windows Server 2019. You can actually decide to pick whether 2016. Now, this part I want you to pay attention to. By default, really, if I want to select, what I do most times is this. People say, yes, if you're in Nigeria, you know the people they call Ijebu. So I actually carry that Ijebu character into even when I want to buy things on Microsoft Azure. So the first thing I do is this. I want to see all the sizes and I go into the cost. So because I'm running a lab environment, but I also need to be careful here because depending on the resources that I pick will also tell me whether I can comfortably do a remote desktop connection or not. If I need to do a remote desktop connection, then I'm looking for a resource that is going to like 8 RAM. So most times by default, when you are spinning it up, this version is what it will give you by default if you don't select. And if you're not careful enough and you just click next, this is what this will take. So what I do is that I come in here to come and see all of the costs and I say, okay, arrange this cost in the others. Let me see which one is cheaper and then which one is not. And then looking at the resources, I can actually pick what is convenient for me. So yes, I need 8 RAM. I just want to run Active Directory to make controller. It's not going to be keeping any resources. It's for a lab environment. So this is more than enough for me. Because I want to do remote desktop. So this is enough for me. So I pick that. Then I click next. So what I'm trying to tell you here is that there is a part you have to be very careful about, So I've picked this, then I need to supply a name for an administrator account. So I'm going to be selecting test me and then also put in my password. Okay, very good. So one of the things I said is that I want to be able to do a remote desktop connection to this virtual machine. So I'll be selecting and my RDP. So a basic knowledge of networking you will need. You want to do some things in Microsoft Azure. You need a little bit of networking. So if you don't have that, I will also encourage you to go to CompTIA network or network plus. You can learn a little bit of it, just understand what all of this port stands for. Then if you have this part says that if I have a license, that is on-premise, I can actually save up to 49%. This is what is called license mobility. Please don't let that bother you too much. In case you are very new to what I'm saying, is when you're very familiar, very comfortable with the cloud journey, you understand what I'm saying. So this is a very important place also you have to pay attention to, so that you don't finish your money on time. Now the OSDIX type, if you by default, they will select premium SSD for you. But this premium SSD, the more how will I put it? The more sophisticated the device, the more computing, your money will be going. So I'll rather come here and select standard HDD, because what am I really running? Depending on the workload, you can. So there is something that is called what sizing, also Azure calculator, that can help you do a sizing of the kind of workload, and also can recommend the right VM that you can use. So, but for me right now, I'm just running this test environment, like I said. So I'll leave all of these and go to networking, which is the next thing. Let me show. So for networking, except you want to define your virtual network, just the same way you do on your Hyper-V, you can actually create a new virtual network. Otherwise, you can leave it the way it is, and then leave everything here default. Remember, whatever you select as your resource group, your virtual network, will go through that same format also. So you can click on your management, whatever you want to do, OS gets diagnostics, whether you want to do backup. If you turn enable backup, remember, you'll be paying for it also. One of the things I'll say that is very key for you to do here is this. You can also do, this is in preview, this is a very fantastic thing I want to talk about. Log in with Azure AD credentials. It's still in preview, which means that now I have created an account in what they call it. If I turn this on, I can actually log in also with all of those credentials, the username, the identity I have on my Azure AD. You understand? So it's still in preview. Then if you turn on backup, like I said, you pay for it. When you enable auto shuts down, it means you want it to be shutting down automatically for you. So, but that does not mean, be careful here, that does not mean that it is still not reading, because the compute power is still reading. So even if it automatically shuts down for you, you still need to go and do what? Stop the machine from running, so that your money does not go. It's very vital. Those are some of the tips and tricks that you will use to run a virtual environment and all of that. So I can do this. And then I click on next. And then I can put if I want to select extension, to buy any extension, probably maybe an antivirus or any form of extension, probably a Sophos extension or whatever extension, I can actually do that from here. And then my tags actually is to say, probably maybe you put a name for the tags, the name of the server, what it does and all of that. So you can actually add your tag, and then you click to create. So yeah, I'm not going to create. I just show you what to do. I have created my own, and then this is what I have. So go through the same process also. Go through the same process both for your Windows server and also your client PC. So now that this is ready, I'm going to log into my Windows server right now. This is the part, please, I want you to pay attention to, because what I'll be doing next now is for me to do what? To promote. So these tasks, you need to have it ahead of next week, because when next week, we are going to continue from here next week. So that's why I'm trying to take a little bit of time to go into this. So this is what my dashboard, when I log into my server for the first time, I will see a server manager, which typically when you hear the word manager, is just to help you manage all of your resources or the components around your servers, So what I need to do right now, I want to have a role for what? The Active Directory domain services. Remember, I have already Azure AD. Now I want to depict an environment where I also have an environment on-premise, and then bring those identities together, and it becomes an hybrid identity from next week. So what you're going to do now is you look at it once again. I came to this place and I did what? Add roles and features, because everything on Windows is actually what? Role-based. So I click on next, and then I click on role-based feature I want to add. The name, I've already given the name of my DC. when I was creating it to be what Winters DC01. So I'm going to come here and do what? So you see, like I said, don't be in a hurry. I used to tell my colleagues, don't be in a hurry to just click next, next, next. People say Microsoft is easy to learn is because it's next, 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 next. But that can be very deceptive because even in the next, you don't take time to understand what each object is or each component you might actually miss out. You can just mouse on each of them and understand what there's a little bit of description for each of them, and with that you can start your learning. So what I'm doing right now is I'm going to select what the Active Directory domain services. And you can see the description here. It stores what information about objects. What are these objects? Users, groups, contacts, PCs, computers. These are the objects on the network. And then it makes it what available to what the users that will want to use it. So I click on this, and then it gives me that I should add my features. Now I click on next. Okay, so now on clicking on next, oh sorry, let me go back. I think it was so the first it's not that it's more of a thing. So when you click on server roles, and then this actually there is something that is called what the features. So to every role you pick that you say you want to install, there are accompanying features that work with it. So it can be likely to you as a person, as a human. You have your attributes. You have what accompanies you as a human. So you have, so you can liken it to that. So features are are components that complement the roles that you have picked. So I'm going to click on next, and then it's going to give me this for me to do what to install. So when I click on install, it doesn't take long. I can have this installation in few minutes. So while this is going on, if you have any question, I can actually take you. So what this is actually saying is that I'm just still what installing my role. I have not promoted this server to what, remember, a domain controller. What we said initially is that we cannot talk about the Active Directory without talking about what the domain controller, because the domain controller is what holds the information. I mean, the Active Directory is the database that holds the information, but what now helps to manage those information and authorize the users on the network and give them that access is actually the domain controller. So we're going to see how we can promote this to the domain controller. So if you have any question why this is going on, before I move to the next one, I'm willing to take, because I know I've taken more of your time. I've taken extra of 17 minutes of your time. So with a raise of hand, I respect everybody's time. If you still want me to continue or you want me to continue next week, please indicate with a raise of hand. Hello. Do I take it that we still want me to continue?
Yes, you have their hands. We have 3 people's hands raised.
Okay. Okay. So okay. Well, yes. Thank you. So we can always go on with it. Thank you. Please, if you have any question at this point, I'm willing to take while this is going on, because I also want to show you. Idara last week showed us how we can script our user, use PowerShell to create all of the users we have in Office 365. I also want to see how you can simplify that with Active Directory domain services, your on-premise. So you have an environment where you have like 5,000 users for you to create, and you have their different departments and you want to give them their different. You can actually script all of that just with, that's the power of PowerShell. You can actually script it. So one of the things I will also encourage you, if you're learning, if you're learning whether it's M365 or any of the Microsoft platform, you cannot do away with the PowerShell. So you need to learn that. Yes, I have a hand raised. Wait, yes, I don't know the name, but it sounds like Daptoma. All right. Yes. Yes. You did not unmute yourself. I don't know whether you're speaking already. Do you want to say something? The name sounds Daptoma. I don't know if I pronounce it very well.
I think it's the time you said we should raise hand if you want.
Okay, okay, all right. Thank you, thank you. So you can bring down your hand. So you can see this, the role services for Active Directory domain service is already installed. So the next thing I want to do is what? Promote this server to a domain controller. So I'm going to talk about a domain controller in the context of the family tree. To every household, you have what is called a father. And then so I'll call that what? My domain controller. That is the father. And if I come into your house today, if you come to a Toriola house, the Toriola is actually like the domain, because everybody in my family bears that name. So there is a Toriola that is like a domain. So the same thing also, when you go into an environment, you will also have what is called a domain. So you have, the first thing you want to see is that, add a domain controller to an existing domain. No, I don't have a domain. I just want to create a new one. So I will be selecting this, add a new domain. No, I'll add a new forest, sorry. Not because it's asking me add a new domain to an existing forest. No, I don't have a forest yet. So I will say I want to create a new forest, which in this case, I would make it also the same name as what? winters.com.ng. So I have this next. So it tells me what my forest functional level is and my domain functional level. Don't worry, we'll come to that much later if we're treating Active Directory, because the forest functional level and domain functional level actually determines the level of security features you have in your forest. So, like I said, your domain controller is actually what? You liken it to the father of the family. But when you come to every father, there must exist a mother. So you look at that mother to be what is called your domain naming system. What the domain naming system, which is what is called a DNS server, is actually going to be doing is what we're doing, what is called name resolution. So, you know, in the African culture, you say that there is nobody that knows better who is the father of a child than a mother. So exactly what a domain naming system. So you want to say, it maps what does it really do? It maps what? It maps your username to an IP. The computer itself only understands binary numbers, 1 and 0. That's what your computer understands. So when you say what a domain naming system is going to do, it's actually going to be doing what? It's going to be resolving the name into what? Into those 1 and 0. So that's what your domain naming system. So it's going to do resolution of your IP addresses, which are in 1s and in 0, to what? The name into IP address, sorry. So you have the domain naming system. Then a domain controller that must exist on your network must also be a global catalog. So when we be talking about authentication, what really does that authentication is actually what is your global catalog that does the authentication. That's what it is for. So when you have applications like, and applications actually talk more with this global catalog, the applications like probably your SharePoint, your Exchange, if you have them on premises, this is who they talk to, which is the global catalog, and then is able to authenticate them. So the global catalog is also the same person as what? Your domain controller. So you say the father, the head of the house is actually the same person. They only have different titles. So that's the same thing. Then I'll create what? A password also. This recovery password says that if anything goes wrong with my domain controller and I want to go into a recovery mode to bring it back, this password is what I'll be using to bring it back. So I have this. Put a password of your choice and make sure you remember it. Oh, I think that is more than. Okay, so I have this. Now, to create a DNS delegation, you don't need it. You can just keep this part. You don't need it, you know. So, and then, so what is going to be my net BIOS name? My net BIOS name would just be, if you are running a domain environment before, what should have been asking you is that you come into the office, the only thing that asks you, you know, when you have a front and a backslash, so it actually picks what the second level, I would say, of your domain, so to say. Because this is more like, in my own case now, it will be like the third level of my domain, because my root level is actually my .com or .ng. So this is like your Winters. So instead of your user writing winters.com.ng / their username, they will just be taking what? Winters. So you just select this Winters and you click next. So it takes it by default for you. Or if you want to select a different one, you can actually put it. You have liberty to change that. Now, like I said, The Active Directory has what is called a database because it keeps record of every object in the directory. So you have this database, and then you have the log files, and you have this sysball folder. This sysball folder is actually what is responsible for your group policies. So you have all of this. You can actually change this part. It is actually recommended you change this part. Best practice is that you change this part if you are running a production environment. So I click next, and then these are all my information. So if I do this and I say view script, you see that every information that I've done, the power of PowerShell, it has already scripted it for me. So I can take all of this information, convert it into a PowerShell format, and take it to another server and run it with us. So I don't need to be putting all of these records one after the other. So that's the beauty of PowerShell. So then I just click next. And then it verifies my prerequisite. If I meet all of the prerequisites that needs to promote this machine to a domain controller, and then when that is done, it asks me to do what? Install. So that's So that's about all, but I still have one more thing. So that's why I'm saying, Do you guys still want to wait, or you think we should continue next week? Because we started pretty late. Oh, okay, I should please continue. All right then. No, this is 6:16. Should I still continue? Raise the hand, please. Hello. Okay, yes, please. I think I like this Yusuf Daniel. Thank you. All right then. So the person that said he couldn't see my screen, can you still see my screen now, please? Can you still see my screen? Or you're still having difficulty seeing my screen, so somebody can assist you. So this is just the whole thing is for us to get all of this sorted out. And when we get this sorted out, well, by the time next week we come in and you see the other tasks we are doing, it makes a lot of sense for you to say, oh, this is how we come about this. So you can actually have this in your environment. And it's also not compulsory that you have to have what they call it, a subscription. I mean, an Azure. Yeah, if you have a good PC that runs Windows 10 that you can enable Hyper-V on, if you have that, why not? You can actually do an Hyper-V environment on it and create your VMs. I actually have one running in my environment. I have one running on my system already, so you can actually have that and then do all your practices if you don't want to go to the cloud, or probably if you run out of credit, so you can do that also. So I'll just wait for this to install, and then when it's installed, it's going to restart, and with that we can now populate our users in the OU. So, but if you have any question before that time, I'm willing to take it. And please don't forget to fill our evaluation form. If you please do fill our evaluation form, tell us how we're doing, let us know how we can help you. If you have any problem with the with running the exercise, let us know. Yes, I still have that.
Yes, he has a hand raised. Yeah, okay. Dabdoma, I think he has a question. Please, you can go on with your question. Hello, Dabdoma. Sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing the name very well. Or you can simply drop it on the chat window if you're having issues with your mic. Just drop your question on the chat window. We'll pick it up from there.
Okay, so this tells me my system is about to restart, and it's going to restart. Hello. Yes, you're well with you.
Yes, thank you very much for. Sorry, this is a great section for me. I really enjoy it a lot. Please, my question is this: there was a time that you said, you know, that because actually I came late, but there was a time you said we can deploy an hybrid, you know, in Azure, if I'm right, that which I didn't get very well. You said from our own on-prem from our own on-prem
Domain controller, AD.
Domain controller, yes. No, which I'm used to that. But the other one, the cloud, that's what I'm not so So I don't know. You said something about proxy. You know that maybe is it that are you saying that what is being done on the local on-prem can be replicated to the cloud? I don't know. So I just want a more clarification on that, please.
All right, that's good. That's a good one. I mean, so I'll go back to it. So what I said earlier is this: you have an environment right now. You are running. You're like what we have now. You're very used to your on-premise Active Directory. Now you've created users on your on-premise Active Directory, and then on Azure, I mean, you sign up for Office 365, Microsoft 365. So you have to create users also on Azure. It might even not be at the initial stage. It might be at a stage later on. Probably maybe you've set up Microsoft 365 subscription and you created all the user. And down in the future, your organization has grown and then they felt, okay, we need more group policy. We need more policies that can be defined on the network. So, and the only way we can have that is that let's have an Active Directory environment on-prem, which can also be infrastructure as a service. I hope you know that. So we can also be an infrastructure as a service. So when you do that, what now happens is that you have an identity in the cloud and you have the same user also again in the on-premise. So that means if I want to access all my resources in the cloud, I have to put in a username that is different from what I have on-premise. So what I'm said is that you can actually merge that. When the process of merging that is what we call hybrid identity, whereas you can have just one single identity, the same username and password. What I use on-premise, I will use it also in the cloud. So I said there are two different ways when it comes to hybrid identity. You have the managed, and when it comes to authentication, you have the managed authentication, you have the federated identity authentication. The federated authentication is the one that allows you to do what? That does allows you to have a federation server in between, and it has a proxy server also, which proxy your request at the end of the day to the on-premise when you are trying to sign into any cloud resources. Also, with the managed authentication, if I can go real quick to that, sorry. So, okay, I think it's here. So with the managed authentication, you also have what is called pass-through authentication. So this pass-through authentication is also like a proxy kind of authentication. So I'm a user of, I want to access my resources on Azure AD. I want to my Exchange Online. But now when it wants to do the authentication for me, it's not doing it as against Azure AD with what I have with my password hash synchronization. It's actually proxying that request back to my on-premise server. Do you understand now? So those are the two scenarios. So I now said with federated identity, because that was what you have before. Before now, we only have password hash synchronization and federated identity under what is called the hybrid identity. But they now look at it, Microsoft look at it, that this is quite very expensive. That is a federated identity because you require nothing less than 4 servers. So they brought in what is called a minimum, which is what a pass-through authentication, which also still proxy your request. That is, in terms of identity, username, your password, it proxy it back to on-premise to say, verify this person is really who it is before you can access any cloud resources. Okay. Am I clear?
I'm clear. Thank you so much.
All right, then.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. So I'm going to be, okay. So I'm gonna, let's see whether my server has come back up. So I'm gonna copy my public IP address once again and see it's logging back there. If any one of us still have questions, I'm available to answer. Can I take all our questions now? Okay. One of the things I want you to just look at, so you see things like group policy clients, you don't get that with Azure. Because I mean that's the only thing people come to on-premise to come and run EDDS. You see, so my server is starting up for the first time. My domain controller. Remember what I said? Your domain controller is what? Liken it to the father of the house who does what? Who allows you to bear his name. So because the domain controller is the first person that's going to have what? The winters.com.ng domain. So that's why you can bear that same name. Now the DNS is actually doing the resolution. When you were in school, there are two things that you are known by. You are either known by what? Your matric number or your name. So my teacher come into my class and say 0055, that used to be my number when I was in Yabatech. And then I say, oh, I don't need to be called my name. I know that is me. The same thing with computer also. You recognize two things. You are known on the computer with what? Your IP or your username. So, but what DNS does it does what? The resolution of that name into IP, because your IP, your computer can only interpret binary numbers, which is 1 and zeros. So you do that. So every object on the Active Directory also is known by what? A username and an IP. So if you create a computer object in Active Directory, it will also have what? An IP address. So that's okay. Like I said, the resource that I'm using may not be too fast because I'm running a what they call it, a lab environment. So if I have the luxury of it is a production environment, definitely I will scale up my resources when I want to use. So once this comes up, the first and the thing you want to go to is that you want to go to the tools. So when you look at tools, what you have on tools is that you have Active Directory users and computer. Remember, we have domain and trust. We don't have that in Azure. You have Active Directory Admin Center. You have sites and services. So this is what I'm going to be picking. I'm going to be picking Active Directory users and computers. This is where I create all my user objects, computer objects, and contacts or printers. So the first thing I want to do is this. My Active Directory allows me to do what is called what? I'm just quickly going to run through it. I'm going to right-click my domain, and I'm going to create what is called what? An organization unit. The organization unit is actually doing what? Is helping me to do what? Create a form of container. Remember your resource group in Azure AD. Azure AD has resource group, but on-premise Active Directory has what is called what? Organization unit, which is going to help me create a container where I can put all my load. So if I want to create all my users, I can define my users even by department, but now I want to create all users here, and it's going to be WinTest users. So I can come here and right click and say I want to create a new user, a new computer, a new group, or whatsoever. So if I create a new user, this is creating it. But imagine me having like 5,000. So let's say I create this user now, Olajumoke, and then last name is Turiola. Oh, sorry. And then my login, I said, is still Olajumoke. And then it's going to ask me to do what? To create a password. And I can say here that the user should change his password as let's log on. Let's assume I don't want to do any of this. So I create a password for create. Okay. Okay, so this is done. This user is done. But imagine me having like 5,000. Does it mean I'm going to be doing all of this? No way. So what I have here is that I'll create, so I'll explain a little bit of what this. I have a folder here called my user profile. And then I have the list of my users in CSV. So what my CSV templates, just like the same template that we used last week. What my CSV template is all about is going to give me my UPN, which is my my user principal name, my first name, my last name, my display name, whatever the job title, and all of that. I'm going to create all of that. This is just me. So you can populate this as much as possible, the CSV file, and I'm going to give all my users a default password. So that at the end of the day, they can reset their password and also. So I have this PowerShell. So one of the things, if you want to learn PowerShell and you don't know the commands, please, I will encourage you to use the ISE for you to learn PowerShell. That is the scripting extension. So you use the integrated scripting extension, that is the PowerShell. So if I come to PowerShell now, maybe I want to PowerShell, if you right click it here, you will see that you have PowerShell ISE. So this format is opening for me right now, is PowerShell ISE. You understand? So what I have here is this. I have import CSV. So what is my CSV? What's the name of my CSV? So I'm going to be putting this side by side. What is my CSV? My CSV is what is in users.csv. So I can put my part, or I decide not to put my part. Right now I'm running this thing, but if I'm running it, I'm copying this command to run, I'll be putting the parts there. So for each, I'm saying new AD user. The SAM account is actually like the accounts that you use in login. Then user principal name, I've put all of those fields there. So I'm now going to say what. And that's why I said, if you are learning PowerShell for the first time, this helps you a lot, because once you click on any of these parameters, it helps you automatically fill it. Just look at me. Let's say, I don't know what parameter is used for first name. Immediately I do this, and I'm typing this. Is actually going to bring up, okay, probably maybe I'm not running. So it's actually supposed to bring up and fill it up for me, so you can actually use this. So another thing is that this helps you also to be able to track your errors. So if I'm running this and probably maybe there is error there, I can quickly see my errors and then it gives me. So this is what I've run, and I like the fact that it's giving me this, because it's telling me that with this error that I'm so it's telling me that if you look at it very well, one thing that PowerShell will do is that because it is a noun verb, it's telling me that, look at it, I don't have this part. That this part does not exist. And I purposely left it on purpose, because reason, this part is actually pointing to what? Is actually pointing to what? My OU. Now, when I look at what I defined here, so I go back to my notepad. I look at what I define here. I look at the notepad. Sorry. So I look at the notepad, my OU that I defined. Sorry, it's not here. Sorry, my OU is here. Sorry. The OU part that I've defined, I said it is what? wintest.com. So wintest user, the OU is correct. It's telling me my OU is correct. Let's look at it together. So this will help you to know how to resolve your problem. Wintest user, that is my OU is correct. Then it's looking at my domain. My domain name is what? Wintest, that's the first part, the first level, dc.com. But what about my ng? My ng is missing. So that's what it's complaining about. So all I need to do is come back here, put a comma, and then put my dc is equals to what? ng. Do you understand? So if I run this now, I shouldn't get any error, hopefully. So you see that my command has completed successfully. All I need to go now is just to check this, refresh this. And see that all my users are there. So with that comes to the end, I want you all to, we'll post all of this also again in the OneDrive, and then give you the instruction on how to go about this. So I want you also to go through it and complete your task ahead of time, ahead of next week. So with that, I come to the end of my my presentation. I've been able to create all of this user. This user is what we're going to use next week to do what is called an hybrid identity, which Adekunle will be taking us on. Any question at this point?
Okay, thank you very much, Jumoke, for that well-detailed and insightful topic on Microsoft 365 identity models and Azure Active Directory. Thank you so much. It was really insightful. I know we are well informed in the house, and if we have further questions, please, we can get it rolling. Have questions or comments? Okay, so I guess we're all well fed this evening. And apologies.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, and apologies for taking much of your time. Like Jumoke mentioned earlier, this platform is not just for pros, it's for students and those just starting their career in IT. And like she also mentioned, next week, Adekunle Dean will be taking us through yet another insightful topic on hybrid identity and directory synchronization for M365. Please don't forget to fill our evaluation form. It's just a short form that you need to fill to tell us how we're doing. And also there's a link on the chat window if you want to join the WhatsApp group. And for all of our recorded sessions, including the one for today, will be made available to you on our YouTube channel that has also been posted on the chat window. So thank you very much, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you next week, Friday, by this same time, 5 p.m. on another insightful session with Adekunle. Thank you, and do enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye. Thank you, Jumoke. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Enjoy your weekend. Sorry that I took your time. Yes, the recording will be available to you, Ibrahim. Yeah, bye-bye.